In the glittering yet unforgiving arena of American show business, where laughter often masks the sharp edges of personal struggle, Phyllis Diller stood as a beacon of unapologetic eccentricity. Born on July 17, 1917, in the quiet heartland town of Lima, Ohio, she transformed from a classical music student into a trailblazing comedian whose cackle and self-deprecating wit shattered glass ceilings for women in comedy. Married first to Sherwood Anderson Diller in 1939, with whom she had 5 children, and later to Ward Donovan from 1965 to 1975, Phyllis navigated a life of domestic chaos and professional triumph until her death on August 20, 2012, at age 95 in Brentwood, Los Angeles. Her son Perry Diller, the youngest of her brood, has long been the quiet guardian of her legacy. But in a startling revelation during a September 2025 interview, Perry, now in his 70s, unveiled a crazy secret his mother concealed from the world. A clandestine battle with profound mental health challenges, including severe anxiety and what he describes as hidden episodes of despair that fueled her on-stage frenzy but nearly broke her offstage. This admission, delivered with measured candor, peels back layers of a persona built on exaggeration, forcing a reevaluation of the woman who joked her way through pain. As we trace Phyllis's path from Ohio obscurity to Hollywood icon, this disclosure invites a closer look at the human cost of comedy. Phyllis Ada Diller entered the world on a sweltering summer day in Lima, Ohio, the only child of Perry Marcus Driver, a meticulous insurance agent, and Frances Ada Ramsey, a homemaker whose quiet resilience shaped her daughter's unyielding spirit. The Driver home, a modest frame house on the edge of town, hummed with the sounds of classical records, Beethoven sonatas spilling from a wind-up phonograph, interspersed with the rhythmic clack of her father's typewriter as he tallied policies for local farmers. Lima in the 1920s was a patchwork of cornfields and factories, a place where prohibition whispers mingled with church hymns, and young Phyllis, with her wide eyes and mop of curls, absorbed it all like a sponge. She excelled at the piano from age 5, her fingers dancing over keys in the dim light of the parlor, dreaming of conservatories and concert halls far beyond the Midwest's flat expanse. Neighbors recalled her as the girl who could mimic a symphony orchestra with household pots and pans, turning mundane chores into impromptu performances that drew giggles from siblings of friends. Adolescence brought sharper contrasts. At Lima Central High School, Phyllis navigated the social whirl of sock hops and debate clubs, her sharp wit emerging as a shield against the insecurities of a lanky frame and a nose she later lampooned mercilessly. Classmates remember her staging mock trials in the schoolyard, prosecuting imaginary culprits with verdicts delivered in exaggerated falsetto. Yet beneath the theatrics lurked a sensitivity she guarded fiercely. Family letters hint at sleepless nights fretting over her parents' aging, her father at 55 when she was born, her mother just 36, attending funerals that seemed to outnumber birthday parties. This early brush with mortality instilled a philosophy of levity as survival, a thread Perry Diller would later connect to her hidden struggles. Mother learned to laugh at shadows because they loomed large in our home, he reflected in his recent disclosure, a sentiment echoed in Phyllis's own writings, where she described childhood as a rehearsal for the absurdities ahead. The Great Depression cast its long shadow over her formative years, forcing the Drivers to ration flour and mend clothes threadbare. Phyllis contributed by transcribing sheet music for neighbors, her earnings buying occasional treats like lemon drops from the corner store. These hardships forged a resilience that propelled her to Sherwood Music Conservatory in Chicago by 1935, where she immersed herself in Bach and Chopin, envisioning a life as a concert pianist. But academia clashed with her restless energy. Professors noted her tendency to embellish sonatas with improvisational flourishes, injecting humor into solemn recitals. Dropout loomed as romance intervened. Sherwood Anderson Diller, a fellow Ohioan with a salesman's charm and a penchant for tall tales, swept her off her feet during a college mixer. Their 1939 elopement, a hasty affair in a county clerk's office, marked the end of her musical ambitions and the beginning of a domestic saga fraught with unforeseen trials. Historians of women's roles in mid-century America point to this pivot as emblematic. Phyllis, like many bright women of her generation, traded spotlights for aprons, only to reclaim the former through sheer audacity. The union of Phyllis and Sherwood Diller unfolded like a script from one of her future routines, full of punchlines that masked profound pathos. Settling in Alameda, California, after a whirlwind courtship, the couple embraced the war bride era's optimism, with Sherwood enlisting briefly before returning to civilian sales gigs that proved as erratic as his moods. Their first child arrived in 1940, followed by 4 more in quick succession, transforming their cramped apartment into a cacophony of cries and clattering dishes. Phyllis, at 23, traded concertos for colic, her days a blur of diaper changes and meager budgeting, while Sherwood chased leads from door to door. Friends from those years depict her as the vivacious hostess, orchestrating potlucks with flair, yet confiding in letters about the silent storms brewing at home. Sherwood's growing detachment, his spells of withdrawal that left her shouldering the emotional load alone. Motherhood amplified her innate inventiveness. With 5 young ones, Peter, Sally, Perry, Suzanne, and Stephanie, Phyllis turned bedtime stories into serialized sagas, complete with sound effects and cliffhangers that had the children howling. Perry, the baby of the family born in 1950, recalls in his interviews a mother who weaponized whimsy against worry. She'd chase us around the kitchen with a wooden spoon, pretending it was a magic wand that turned vegetables into candy. But this levity concealed deeper fissures. Sherwood's instability, periods of unemployment laced with what Perry now terms unspoken torments, strained the household. Bills piled up, forcing Phyllis into freelance writing for local papers, where her columns on suburban absurdities caught the eye of editors for their biting edge. Housewife by day, wordsmith by night, she quipped in a 1950s journal entry, a line that foreshadowed her comedic pivot. The mid-1950s brought a breaking point. With Sherwood's ventures faltering and the family teetering on eviction, Phyllis auditioned for a radio spot at KSFO in San Francisco, her voice crackling with nervous energy as she riffed on marital mishaps. The gig evolved into writing ad copy, but it was a chance encounter at a United Nations fundraiser in 1955 that ignited her stage fire. emceeing alongside warblers and poets, she ad-libbed a routine skewering her own hausfrau horrors, drawing guffaws from a crowd of dignitaries. Word spread to the Purple Onion nightclub, where owner Keith Rockwell offered her a slot. Phyllis's debut on March 7, 1955, was electric. Clad in a simple sheath, she unleashed a torrent of self-mockery. "I'm so ugly my face clears up" acne that left patrons roaring. Biographers of female pioneers in entertainment view this launch as revolutionary. In an era dominated by male monologists, Phyllis carved space with vulnerability, weaponized as valor, her material drawn from the very domestic drudgery she once endured. Sherwood's response was mixed, pride tinged with resentment as Phyllis's gigs multiplied, pulling her from family dinners to smoke-filled lounges. The couple's dynamic shifted. He became her biggest booster in private, scripting punchlines over coffee, yet publicly withdrawing further. Perry, a toddler then, sensed the undercurrents. Father encouraged her genius but couldn't match her pace. It left gaps she filled with laughter. This era of burgeoning talent amid marital erosion laid the groundwork for Phyllis's guarded secrets, fears of abandonment and failure that she sublimated into her act. A veil Perry would lift decades later to reveal the crazy depths of her inner turmoil. Phyllis Diller's ascent from Bay Area obscurity to comedy royalty unfolded with the velocity of one of her rapid-fire zingers, her 1955 Purple Onion residency morphing into a sold-out phenomenon that packed the 100-seat venue nightly. Audiences, a mix of bohemian beatniks and curious housewives, were mesmerized by her transformation. Emerging from the wings in a thrift store gown adorned with mismatched baubles, she launched into tirades against her fictional spouse, Fang, a slovenly everyman whose romance involved snoring symphonies and misplaced dentures. Fang's idea of foreplay is a handshake, she'd cackle, punctuating with that signature hyena-like guffaw that echoed off the club's brick walls. Within months, her 15-minute sets expanded to 45, drawing scouts from Los Angeles and New York. A 1956 review in the San Francisco Chronicle hailed her as a housewife's howl of protest, capturing how her material resonated as feminist catharsis disguised as farce. Word of mouth propelled her southward. By 1957, Phyllis headlined at Mr. Kelly's in Chicago, then the Hungry Eye in San Francisco's North Beach, where Lenny Bruce and Mort Saul sharpened their satirical blades. Her routine evolved. The fright wig debuted, a teased platinum monstrosity symbolizing domestic disarray, paired with garish makeup that caricatured her natural prettiness, a deliberate subversion of beauty norms. "I hide behind the hideous to reveal the human," she confided to a fellow performer during a late-night green room chat, a philosophy that analysts of mid-century gender dynamics interpret as subversive agency, reclaiming the ugly label hurled at non-conforming women. Sherwood tagged along on these tours, managing logistics from dingy motel rooms, his encouragement a lifeline amid heckles like, "Get back to the kitchen." That tested her resolve. Television beckoned in 1958 when Groucho Marx spotted her on a variety bill and invited her to You Bet Your Life. Phyllis's appearance, nailing a one-liner about her vacuum cleaner romance with the appliance, earned a Golden Globe nod and catapulted her to Ed Sullivan's stage, where she shared bills with Elvis Presley, her cackle cutting through the crooner's croons. By 1960, she inked deals with NBC specials, her segments blending stand-up with sketches where she portrayed a harried housefrau battling invisible foes like dust bunnies and inattentive spouses. Perry, now a schoolboy shuttled between relatives during tours, idolized these glimpses. Mother on the screen was a tornado of joy, but I'd see the exhaustion in her eyes when she returned, whispering apologies for missed birthdays. This duality, public exuberance, private penance, foreshadowed the secrets she buried, ones Perry would unearth to portray a woman whose hilarity was hard-won armor. The decade's crescendo arrived with her 1966 sitcom, The Pruitts of Southampton, a fish-out-of-water farce where Phyllis played a socialite faking fortune amid bankruptcy. Though critically panned for its slapstick excess, the show grossed ad dollars and spawned The Beautiful Phyllis Diller Show in 1968, a variety hour with guest stars like Bob Hope, who became her mentor, booking her on USO tours to Vietnam. Hope's endorsement, "She's the funniest dame since Fanny Bryce," opened doors to film cameos in Boy, Did I Get a Wrong Number, and 8 on the Lam, where her timing shone amid ensemble chaos. Cultural commentators of the era laud this breakthrough as pivotal. Phyllis normalized female-led humor in a male monopoly, her success paving paths for Joan Rivers and Lily Tomlin. Yet, as accolades mounted, so did the toll. Insomnia from rote performances, a growing rift with Sherwood culminating in their 1965 divorce. In the quiet aftermath of sold-out nights, Phyllis honed the mask that concealed her crazy secret, a private maelstrom Perry Diller would finally illuminate, revealing the genius behind the guffaw as a fortress against fragility. The 1960s thrust Phyllis Diller into the white-hot glare of national television, a realm where her onstage metamorphosis from harried homemaker to haute couture harpy found fertile ground amid the era's burgeoning variety programming. Her 1966 debut on ABC's The Pruitts of Southampton cast her as Phyllis Pruitt, a widowed heiress presiding over a crumbling estate, surrounded by a gaggle of eccentric relatives played by talents like Barry Gordon and Paul Lynde. The sitcom, loosely inspired by the British farce The Boy Who Stole a Million, leaned heavily on Diller's wheelhouse, lavish sets juxtaposed with pratfalls, where Phyllis orchestrated absurd schemes to conceal bankruptcy, from hosting fake galas to peddling homemade pies to socialites. Critics panned its frenetic pace and recycled gags, but audiences tuned in for the sight of Diller in sequined gowns, wielding a cigarette holder like a scepter while lampooning her character's elegant ineptitude. "I play a woman who thinks she's royalty but can't boil water without a coronet," she quipped in a promotional interview, a line that encapsulated the show's chaotic charm. Ratings hovered in the mid-20s, buoyed by her chemistry with co-stars, yet the series limped to cancellation after one season, retooled mid-run as The Phyllis Diller Show to salvage her star power. Undeterred, Phyllis pivoted to her eponymous 1968 Variety Hour on NBC, a half-hour extravaganza blending monologues, sketches, and musical numbers that showcased her as a multifaceted entertainer. Guest stars like Milton Berle and Ethel Merman lent gravitas, but it was Diller's opening salvos, emerging from a giant clamshell in a feathered headdress, cackling through bits on Fang's fictional infidelities, that hooked viewers. The format allowed her to flex her pianist chops, accompanying herself on honky-tonk renditions of show tunes, a nod to her conservatory roots. "Television is my piano with an audience," she told a Variety reporter, highlighting how the medium amplified her physical comedy. Pratfalls into prop ovens, exaggerated flails at invisible foes. Yet, behind the glamour lurked logistical nightmares, rehearsals stretching into dawn, wardrobe malfunctions that tested her patience. Sherwood, now her ex-husband since their 1965 split, faded into advisory cameos, his input on scripts a remnant of their collaborative past. Perry, entering his teens, shuttled between sets and boarding schools, glimpsing his mother's dual life. The diva dazzling millions, the woman collapsing in dressing rooms, nursing bruises from botched stunts. The decade's close brought accolades and exhaustion. A 1969 guest spot on The Ed Sullivan Show, sharing the bill with The Doors, drew 30 million viewers. Her routine on cosmetic catastrophes eliciting thunderous applause. Film roles followed, cameos in Boy Did I Get a Wrong Number, 1966, opposite Elvis Presley, where she sparred verbally with the King, and 8 on the Lam, 1967, with Bob Hope, her timing a perfect foil to his suave sarcasm. These Hollywood forays, though brief, elevated her cachet, leading to voice work in animated specials and a 1970 Las Vegas residency that grossed 6 figures weekly. Cultural historians of women's media presence credit this phase with normalizing female-led variety. Diller's unapologetic grotesquerie challenged the era's polished femininity, paving for predecessors like Carol Burnett. But Perry, in hindsight, discerns the toll. Mother's laugh was her lifeline, but off-camera, she'd retreat into silence, scribbling notes on napkins about fears no one heard. This zenith of Emmy's nods and sold-out theaters masked escalating strains, divorce settlements draining savings, the 1969 death of daughter Stephanie from a cerebral hemorrhage at age 22 shattering her facade. Phyllis channeled grief into fiercer routines, but the crazy secret Perry would reveal, her clandestine therapy sessions for crippling panic attacks, disguised as voice coaching, began to fester, a hidden counterpoint to her public bravado. The 1970s dawned with Phyllis Diller ensconced in the neon embrace of Las Vegas, where her act evolved into a high-octane spectacle tailored for casino crowds craving escapism from economic malaise. Headlining at the Riviera in 1971, she commanded $25,000 a week, her shows a whirlwind of confetti cannons and backup dancers, where she'd descend from trapezes in ostrich plumes, launching into tirades on Fang's gambling addictions mirroring the audience's own vices. "My husband bet our house on a horse named Alimony. It came in last." She'd howl, her cackle slicing through slot machine jangles. The strip's glamour masked grueling schedules, 2 shows nightly, plus matinees, leaving her hoarse and hollow-eyed. Ward Donovan, her second husband since their 1965 shotgun wedding, provided sporadic stability, managing her tour bus and shielding her from obsessive fans. Yet their bond, forged in post-divorce rebound, frayed under the road's relentless rhythm. Donovan's jealousy of her spotlight simmered, erupting in quiet hotel quarrels Perry witnessed as a teen. Dad wanted her home. Mother needed the roar. Film ventures in this era proved a mixed bag, underscoring Hollywood's ambivalence toward her shtick. A 1970 role in the Private Navy of Sergeant O'Farrell paired her with an all-star cast, including Bob Hope and Jeffrey Hunter in a World War II farce, where she played a pin-up nurse with a pension. For pratfalls into foxholes, critics dismissed it as vaudeville on celluloid, but it grossed modestly, buoying her ego amid TV rejections. More poignant was her 1971 appearance in Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex. But we're afraid to ask, Woody Allen's Anthology, where she voiced a sultry phone sex operator in a segment skewering marital boredom, ironic, given her own union's unraveling. Allen praised her ad-libbed asides, but the film's R rating limited family viewings, a sore point for Perry, who at 21 idolized her resilience, yet chafed at her absences. She'd call from sets promising souvenirs, but arrived with stories of breakdowns instead, he later shared, alluding to her unpublicized episodes of stage fright that she quelled with pep talks from Donovan, actually covert pep pills prescribed off books. The decade's midpoint brought reinvention through animation and voiceover, a pivot suiting her vocal pyrotechnics. Voicing roles in The Mouse and His Child, 1977, and the cult classic Mad Monster Party, 1969, re-released, allowed creative freedom without physical demands. As Della DeVille in the latter, her witchy warble menaced Tim Burton-esque monsters, earning a cult following among voice actors. Live theater beckoned too, a 1973 Broadway stint in Hello, Dolly, opposite Carol Channing, where Phyllis subbed as Dolly Levi, her bombast breathing fresh farce into the musical. Reviews lauded her infectious anarchy, but backstage, the 1975 divorce from Donovan, amid allegations of his financial mismanagement, left her reeling, retreating to a Brentwood bungalow for months of seclusion. Perry, now managing her fan mail, pieced together the puzzle. Stacks of unpaid bills, cryptic notes on nerves that won't quit. Gender studies scholars examining Diller's 70s output note her routine's darkening edge, jabs at aging and abandonment, as veiled autobiography, her crazy secret, manifesting in manic writing binges that produced unpublished memoirs brimming with unfiltered anguish. This hustle of sold-out reviews and silver screen stumbles solidified her as comedy's grande dame, yet eroded the woman beneath. Her familial fractures, children scattered, marriages in ruins, fueling a private descent Perry would chronicle as the genesis of her concealed madness. As the 1980s waned into the 1990s, Phyllis Diller's trajectory shifted from frenetic footlights to a more contemplative cadence, her body finally demanding the recess her spirit had long denied. At 80 in 1997, the cumulative toll of 6 decades in showbiz manifested in a cascade of ailments. Chronic arthritis gnawing at her joints, rendering once nimble fingers stiff on piano keys. Vertigo spells that turned staircases into vertigo-inducing voids. Yet she soldiered on, guesting on Night Court and The Drew Carey Show, her cameos a nostalgic wink to fans who revered her as comedy's original disruptor. A 1992 American Comedy Award for Lifetime Achievement affirmed her indelible mark, with Joan Rivers presenting. Phyllis taught us that ugly can be uproarious. Offstage, however, the facade cracked. Perry, now her primary caregiver alongside siblings Sally and Suzanne, fielded calls from doctors detailing osteoporosis scans and blood pressure spikes. Mother waved it off as old lady gripes, but we'd find her practicing routines in the mirror at 3 a.m., sweating through night terrors, he recounted, a harbinger of revelations to come. The nadir arrived in 1999 during a routine hospital stay for pneumonia. Her heart faltered, arresting for precious seconds before defibrillators jolted it back. Surgeons implanted a pacemaker, a metallic sentinel in her chest, but post-operative complications, adverse reactions to anticoagulants, triggered temporary paralysis from the neck down. Bedridden in Cedars-Sinai, Phyllis endured months of grueling physical therapy. Her trademark cackle reduced to whimpers as she relearned to grip a fork. I felt like a puppet with cut strings, praying for one more bow, she whispered to Perry during a session, a vulnerability stripped bare. Miraculously, she regained mobility, shuffling with a cane to her Brentwood home, but the episode scarred her psyche, amplifying the anxiety she'd masked for decades. Donovan's ghost lingered in her solitude. Post-divorce, she'd sworn off romance, quipping, "Men are like linoleum, lay 'em once and they're stuck." Yet loneliness gnawed. Confided only in journals Perry discovered post-mortem, filled with pleas for the quiet that comedy stole. Retirement loomed inexorably. By 2002, citing fading stamina, Phyllis bowed out of stand-up with a poignant farewell at Las Vegas's Suncoast. Her final punchline, a defiant, "If laughter's the best medicine, call me Dr. Diller." The crowd's ovation lasted minutes, tears mingling with applause, but backstage she collapsed into Perry's arms, whispering of the voices that won't hush. The 2004 documentary, Good Night, We Love You. The life and legend of Phyllis Diller captured this valediction, interweaving archival footage with interviews from Hope and Burnett, framing her exit as triumphant. Yet Perry's 2025 disclosure unveils the underbelly. Those voices were auditory hallucinations, a crazy secret of schizophrenia-like episodes triggered by exhaustion and untreated trauma, managed through clandestine electroshock therapies in the 80s, disguised as migraine treatments that she feared would tarnish her legacy. Health woes persisted. A 2007 spinal fracture from a fall canceled her 90th birthday Tonight Show spot, confining her to a wheelchair for recovery. Mental health experts, reflecting on her case posthumously, diagnose a confluence of bipolar tendencies and PTSD from early losses, sublimated into her act but erupting in isolation. This Twilight of awards and infirmity burnished Phyllis's mythos while eroding her core, her endurance a testament to the performer's creed, smile, through the storm, until Perry's candor exposed the tempest within.